back again for some more Got Hockey. And today I've got someone who many would put on the Mount Rushmore of goalie gear makers. Today I've got Glenn Miller joining me. Glenn, thanks for joining me today. How you doing?
Good, very good, to be honest with you.
Yeah, great. Good to hear it. Thanks again. Maybe we'll just start at the beginning. Most of us are goalies who are tuning in, and so we want to know how you got started in this whole thing. Did you start off as a goaltender when you were a kid?
I played organized hockey when I was 10, then I quit for 5 years. I got tired of it. I wasn't that good of a skater, and I just said, well, there's other things. So I pursued some other sports. I got back into it when I was 15.
Mhm.
As far as playing and stuff, when I started playing with guys in high school and stuff, never played really organized sports till I joined a beer league after I got out of high school. Played some beer league hockey, and was fascinated with the equipment because you're going back in the 60s now.
Okay.
And then I graduated in 70, June of 70, and the equipment at that time, of course, was deer hair, kapok, leather, canvas. And Carl Bagnell I was out of college. I was working at the University of Michigan's ice rink part-time as a student. And Carl Bagnell was the goaltender for the University of Michigan, and he had a pair of Coopers, and there was nobody that could fix them. And I asked him one Thursday, because they had a game on, they played the games on Friday and Saturday.
Okay.
I said, could I take this thing home? Actually, I'm sorry, it was a Sunday. The game at Saturday night had stopped. I asked him if I could take the thing home. I said, let me see if I can fix it. So I had an old carpet needle and some wax thread, and I went home and took an old piece of moccasin, cut it up, and basically sewed it on there. That was really the first thing in hockey I ever did. I got into doing repair because I enjoyed doing it. And I said there had to be better ways to build the current equipment than what I saw in front of me. So I continued to do repairs. I ended up working for Bob Pirani in 1979. I graduated from college from the University of Michigan in 75. Was doing some other things. I was working for Baskin Robbins, and I didn't particularly like it. I wanted to try something else. Went to work for Bob, and I worked for him for a year.
Was that in a retail location?
One of the he had 4 retail locations in Michigan at that time. He hadn't expanded to any type of, I guess you could say, numbers that he did later on.
Right.
And a gentleman by the name of Tim Farrell, he left his job. He was the manager of Yost Ice Arena, and we both went to work for Bob. I actually worked under Tim. And he asked me one day, he said, do you think you could build a pair of pads? I said, well, I built a pair of prototypes in 76, and some things worked, some things didn't. I said, why? He said, I got a friend that is in with the Red Wing organization, and Rogie was coming in under the big contract from the LA Kings to the Detroit
Rogie Vachon.
Rogie Vachon. And I said, if I arrange it, you want to go down and see him? I said, sure, let's go down and see him.
Ah, hey.
So we went down to see him in October of 79.
Okay. I was a month old.
And we were introduced to Rogie. He was getting ready to go out for a morning skate. I think he was wearing he's either wearing Bordeaux's or Konecki's. I don't remember which.
Right.
And I said, I think I could build you a pair of pads. I haven't done it before. Would you? He said, I'd be interested, only because I'd try them. He said, I'm always looking for new things. So I took some measurements from him, went back and spent the next almost 3 months building these things. You're prototyping it. You're trying to put some of your ideas together, sewing it. I finished the goal pads on New Year's Eve day, which was December 31st, 1979. Now the Wings were out of town. They were not due back to the Olympia because they were still playing at the Olympia.
Right.
Before even Joe Louis, until January 10th. So we went down to see Rogie, but one thing I want to, if I may intermix here, Tim, when I was designing these things, Tim said, we're going to need a logo to put on. And I said, well, okay. So he did a quick sketch of a logo, knew somebody that could screen print. I said, what color do you think we should make it? And he said, the Wings are red and white. And I said, well, red's my favorite color, so let's go with the red and white since it's the Wings. And that's how the Miller logo came to be.
There you go.
Only because of the Wings. So
From
we
humble
dropped them off.
beginnings.
Yeah, we dropped them off to him on that morning because both of us were working afternoon and evening shifts at Bob's facilities. Anyway, we dropped them off to Rogie. Rogie put them on, strapped them out, and went out and did a morning skate. And of course, you might know the first guy to come down and take a shot on him is Reed Larson, and he had a cannon, if you remember, an absolute cannon. And I mean, that thing hit the pad. You could sound like a bass drum going off in that whole arena because there's no fans or anything.
Right.
Boom, you know. And so we stayed we were really just going to drop him off and leave. Tim said, why don't we stay for the skate and see how he likes them? I said, okay. So they finished the skate. They obviously were stiff. Rogie worked them in as best he could. And he got off the ice and I said, how do they feel? He said, they actually don't feel too bad. He said, they're a little stiff, but I expect them to be. He said, in fact, they're a little bit lighter than I thought they would be. And I had made them out of horsehide, which you cannot get anymore. Horsehide really is, unfortunately, is non-existent per se, other than very special applications today, because they don't slaughter horses in the US or Canada anymore.
Right.
When they did, horsehide was quite prevalent. Cooper used a lot of it in their production of goalie equipment, as did other manufacturers. But again, you can't get it today. So
yeah.
You do what you can. Rogie said, I'm going to wear these in practice till I'm happy. Then I'm going to wear them in the game. And I think a week and a half later, he wore them in the game, and he never wore anything else after that. Even when he got traded to Boston, I built pads for him.
Wow.
So
just out of. Oh my God. You just told the most amazing story. Hello. Yeah, that's okay. You know, the nice thing is it waited until you were done that story about Rogie. So I got that whole thing on there, and we'll pick it up again maybe in a couple days.
How's that?
That's perfect. We'll just leave it at that, and we won't touch anything.
Not when you consider what we had to do to get here.
Exactly. Well, lo and behold, here we are. We're back here again after a short delay. Still here with Glenn Miller. Still here for some more God hockey. So when we left off, you told a fantastic story about getting started in the game, and I didn't even realize that. So basically, your first real functional goal pad, more or less, that you had made was worn by an NHL goalie.
Correct.
That's all. To me, that alone is unbelievable.
Well, it comes from years of doing repair.
Right.
So
sure.
Which that's your schooling, that's your training ground. Mm-hmm. And I always tell people, you start off with repair. You can't jump in and start building something. You have to have some kind of skills. Mm-hmm. On a sewing machine, or being able to look and see how somebody built something to be able to go from there. It's just somebody rebuilding a motor on a car. You just don't tear it apart. You got to have some kind of knowledge of how it works.
Sure. Absolutely.
And it's the same, it's the same thing with goalie equipment. I'm lucky in that I'm self-taught pretty much, and that gives you an advantage simply because of the fact you have to learn it.
Yeah, you've got your hands in the dirt, so to speak.
Correct.
You've got all that practical.
Right.
Yeah. No, I know. Well, even for me, I mean, I obviously being in a retail background, but I've done, not to the extent that you have, or that you probably were doing when you were starting out even. But I mean, I know how to mostly take things apart and put things back together. I'd never go so far as to say I'd jump right in and try to build one.
No, but, and I was going to say, if I may interrupt, there was cases where I would take it apart, and I wasn't sure I could put it back together, because this was
I've been there too.
You had cell phones or anything to be able to take pictures.
Right.
Cell phone, the ability of the computer, which has phone capabilities, which is what we're on, to take pictures more or less instantaneously.
Yeah.
Has really made life easier in so many ways.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Goalie equipment or goalie repair being just one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, okay, so we've got Rogie Vachon as number one. I think for me, the first guys I ever remember would have been like, so one of my favorite goalies, my first like real favorite goalie growing up was Alan Bester.
Mhm.
And so he would have been another guy that wore your pads as well, I believe.
I think we built Bester two pair. We built one pair while I was there at Northwest Miller up in Delta, British Columbia.
Okay.
Then we moved. The initial plant was down by the river, and then we moved it up to Surrey, which we were able to combine the plant and the offices in one. And the two other partners I had, which were Gary Scott and Paul Fricker, that made it easier being able to do that. And I built a pair for Bester. And then I think I left in February of 90.
Oh, okay.
The reasons I won't go into, let's just
Sure.
say it wasn't a happy experience in some ways. And I was only supposed to be up there for a year, and I was up there for 4 off and on, away from my wife and my daughter. So that wasn't fun. But Gary left the company more or less. We forced Gary out because he was with problems. I decided to leave as well, and my top apprentice, which was Al Peterson, took over as a shareholder. So Paul and Al ran Miller from that time on.
Mm.
And then Al left, I don't know, year and a half, 2 years later, and Fricker was running it on his own. They had made a decision to leave retail and to leave wholesale and go to strictly direct retail. Now, once you do that, you cut your dealers off because the dealers aren't going to handle it. So that cuts your amount of sales out.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe hockey equipment in this day and age will eventually become by direct. I think the dealers will disappear. And the main reason is the dealers, you needed the dealers to expose the product and for people to come in and try and fit it. In today's day and age, with rare exceptions, you've got big dealers, Goalie Monkey.
Yeah.
What's a couple other ones I'm just trying to think of? Goalie Monkey is the one that always comes to mind.
Sure.
And so much is shipped direct. The problem is you don't get a chance to try the gear on when you do that. I think in 5 years this is just my own personal opinion. I don't think dealers will be around in 5 years.
Wow.
Because Bauer already gone to setting up retail stores direct.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're going to see that. And there's a number of reasons for it. The main reason is that dealers don't pay bills.
Okay.
So you as a manufacturer are fronting all the expenses up, to basically build hockey equipment and deliver it. And then you have to wait to get paid. So you have to have a tremendous cash flow. I'll give you, for instance, the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
The NHL would get gear. A lot of them would get gear in August for the upcoming season. And Mike would try to get gear to them early so they could break it in before training camp. You know when Mike was getting paid for that gear a lot of times? June of the following year.
Right. This is, that's Mike Vaughn?
That's Mike Vaughn.
Okay. Right.
And I would say it's probably the same with CCM, Bauer. Of course, those are much bigger corporations.
Right.
With tremendous cash flow. And they can afford to sit on it. Vaughn is fairly good size, but he's not in the size of a CCM or a Bauer. And I think because of that, you're going to see people go to direct sales. Konecki's does it now. Paso does it. They're eliminating the dealer and going directly to the customer. The disadvantage of that is when you do not have sales to dealers, you have to wait for basically the sale to come in the door.
Right.
In days of old, stores would order store stock, as I call it.
Yeah.
And of course, that would keep the manufacturers working. And, the problem that you run into, the number of stores has dwindled greatly. I know for a fact retail sales to young players in Canada just starting out. When I left in 2017, they were down 34%. Hockey is contracting as far as the young players are. But the beer league, as we call it, adult hockey has exploded.
Right.
There's not enough ice time for the guys playing beer league hockey. Guys that got out of hockey for 15, 20 years, whatever, have come back into it.
Sure.
Hockey's one of those rare sports that you can play besides golf above about the age of 45. If you go to the other major sports, basketball, football, baseball, yeah, baseball will have it will have co-ed softball, but regular baseball, football, and basketball pretty much done by the age of 40, 45, simply
Right.
because the body can handle it. Hockey's one of those rare sports. I know guys 70 plus years old
Yeah, I
still
see
playing
guys like
goal,
that all the time.
still playing goal. You
Mhm.
can't do that in the other major sports, but you can do it in hockey. Other than fishing, of course, fishing. You can do it. But pretty much golf and hockey are the two sports you can play later in life.
Pretty well all the way through, as long as you're physically able to get out there.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
can't play golf anymore because I've dealt with problems with my hands and my back. I've got sciatica now, and that's not, I've got a 50-year reunion. It's been postponed 2 years, coming up in August. I can't play in the golf thing because my sciatica's active.
Hmm.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. For sure. If it was a Father Time, he's undefeated.
He's going to win every battle. Let's put it
That's right.
that way.
Yeah, he wins put your money on Father Time every
Correct.
time.
Otherwise, you're going to lose.
Yeah, yeah. So coming out of the Miller brand, I guess that's a strange place to be, where you leave your own. I mean, Brian Heaton did it. I mean, twice really, when you think about it. That must have been an odd one. So you come back to Michigan. Is
I come
that
back to
where
Michigan.
is that where the great saves?
No. Well, Grace, what happened with what is this? I come back to Michigan in 90. I took that pretty much half the year off because I came back in February. I was supposed to get paid from Northwest Miller for 3 years. I only got paid for one. And of course, you got to try to take them to court. And that means I got to try to go to court in British Columbia from
Right.
Ann Arbor, Michigan. No.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
It is what it is. I've always been a man of my word, and I can honestly say a lot of people I have dealt with are not.
You do find that sometimes in the industry.
You will find, I defy you to find something bad about me. People in the 45 plus years in hockey, I've been in hockey.
I've yet to encounter anyone who would say anything negative. I've only encountered people who would, I'm sure, back you on that 100%.
Well, it's a situation with my late father taught me, always be courteous to people, because it will get you out of 99 out of 100 bad situations. And that's what, and hockey has cost me a considerable amount of money over the years. My wife is not happy about it, simply because she's seen what's happened to me and has affected both of us.
Right.
And we persevered through it. I've lost a good amount of money in 2 ventures in hockey, but that's life. When I decided I wanted a chance to go to Canada with 2 Canadian partners, my late dad said 7 out of 10 people will automatically not take the chance. One will be undecided right to the end. And of that, the other 2, one will succeed, one will fail. So he said, you roughly got 10% of a chance to make it if you go after it. But he said, if you don't, you always wonder what would have happened had you not tried it.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained. That sort of thing. Yeah.
So, but it's I enjoy hockey. I mean, I'm at a retirement age, but I enjoy what I do. I have fun with it.
Clearly.
And it's not a business to me. And Mike Vaughn's case, Mike was a lot like me, but later on he became a businessman.
Mm-hmm.
And he still is a businessman today. And he's a multi-millionaire because of it. I mean, he's very successful, done well. And for that, I give him graces and my respect. The 1 year I worked with Pirani before I started to go out on my own, which was 78 to 79. Bob was coming off of bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
And later on down the road, of course, he became a multi-millionaire when he went to the mail order business.
Yeah.
And was very, very successful.
Yeah, Bob, the Pirani thing was really interesting. Now, I never never experienced it myself in any of the stores. That I think the closest ones to me in Toronto would have been London and Windsor, but they were
Right.
all over the place in Michigan and that sort of area. And I think what they really succeeded at was they were always able to pick up just fantastic deals on stuff, and they were able
Well,
to
right.
warehouse all this equipment.
He was known as the closeout king. When we had the show,
Exactly.
when we had the hockey shows up in Montreal,
Yeah. The good old
um,
days.
yeah, the late 80s, early 90s, that was the peak time for the hockey shows.
Hmm.
Bob would go in there and he would go see the big manufacturers. That time, Bauer, Cooper, what other companies, like, you could CCM, whatever you want.
Yeah.
And they would say, he'd look to see what they have left in equipment. He'd buy the whole thing. He just offer him a price and buy the whole thing.
Yeah.
Where I think the mistake was made is, let's say he was buying it for 40 cents on the dollar.
Hmm.
Okay. So his cost is 40% what wholesale would be.
Yep.
He's still trying to get retail for it.
Yeah. That'll hurt you.
And you
That'll
see
hurt you.
there's still stuff sitting in Pirani. It's been there 15, 20 years because he won't lower the price. Well, I've learned with hockey equipment, and Mike Vaughn said it best. He says, you have to turn this stuff over. And
Yeah.
this ain't
Can't pay
making
your
it
employees with goalie pads.
right. The longer it sits in a store, the more it costs you because the meters run.
Right.
You've paid for it, but you haven't got a return on it.
Yeah.
So, there was a store up in Minnesota, which I won't tell you. He had goalie equipment up there that was 25 years old, and he's still trying to get retail.
Yeah. That's at some point you gotta.
Well, it has a shelf life. If it's
Exactly.
made of Merino, Gen Pro, whatever you want to call it, synthetic materials, that has a shelf life.
Yeah.
Leather has a shelf life if you don't take care of it. You have to treat it.
Hmm.
Otherwise, if you treat it, leather will last indefinitely. But it's a material that needs to be taken care of.
Hmm. Right.
I get requests all the time where guys are buying old equipment and want to know, and the pads look like they've been sitting out in the Sahara for the last half a year. I mean, drier than hell. And I said, the first thing you have to do before you even do anything to it, you saddle soap, which saddle soap runs the function of cleaning the leather, opening up the pores, and conditioning the leather a little bit.
Right.
Once you saddle soap it, then you have to put leather conditioners. They can be, I can mention names, Lexol, Neat's Foot Oil. There's so many more compounds and chemicals and stuff for leather treatment today than there was 35 years ago. It's incredible what they've come up with. And you have to be able to treat that stuff for it to last.
Right.
Absolutely. It's just like the vinyl on your, on your dashboard. If you leave it out in the sun all the time, don't put anything on it, what's going to happen to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Whereas
absolutely.
Armor All or something, that's a whole different ballgame. Leather's the same way. And we always used, with the exception till they went to colored leather, Cooper, which was known for really the best leather, I think. Vaughn used leather when he first started. Brown, Bordeaux, some of the classic names. We always used what was called a naked leather. And by that, I mean, if you wetted your finger and touched it to the leather would darken. That meant you can condition it. The problem is when you go to a colored leather, they have to dye that. And if it's especially white, I just ordered some white leather for a guy that wants me to build a catching glove like we build Belfour, a Miller catching glove. And he's got a Belfour tribute and he wants to he doesn't have the catcher. So he wanted to know if I could build it. I said, yeah, I have to order the leather. And that's a white leather. And the white leather has always got a top coat on it, because if it was naked white leather, it would be gray in about 2 days.
Right.
You have to treat it. And what they do is they put a top coat on it, and that's what gives you a nice bright white, and that's absorbs it. And then a lot of times with the white, they will put some kind of a finish coat on it, a sealant, let's say, I'll just say urethane as an example, but they won't use urethane to seal it. The problem is with that time of leather, you can't treat it because the stuff that you put on it will not penetrate the tops. And eventually that leather dry rots.
Yeah. So there's a clock.
Correct.
Yeah.
There is a clock.
That will definitely be a tricky part. I know, I guess around that era, I mean, obviously once everything went to the synthetics, I mean, the color just became a whole different,
Oh,
a whole
the whole
different
different
ballgame.
ballgame. What to give you, for instance, the first Clarino was the first synthetic leather made by the Japanese. It's the first
Okay.
stuff. And what it is, they make a base cloth that approximates the suede or fiber of leather. They
Mhm.
make that polyester and it runs in all different directions. Then they put a urethane film on top of that. And the urethane film has the color in it and or the texture, if it's a weave, okay? And they bond those two elements, they fuse them together under pressure and rollers. So you're bringing a roll of top coat on one side, a roll of the film on the other, and then they fuse that together with the two stainless steel rolls under pressure, and they bond that. And trust me, you can't get it apart. The problem is the film has a urethane base to it, polyurethane. Polyurethane has a shelf life of about 15 years.
Okay.
And I've worked on Clarino pads where people have brought me to work on it. The Clarino's beginning to deteriorate.
Sure.
So it's SOL.
Yeah. And there's nothing you can really do you can't restore it and things like it's just not, it doesn't have that in its nature.
No, you can't restore it. And because of that, and all the stuff that's made today is going to, whatever name you want to give to it, there's been all kinds of second, third, 10 generations of material built, but it's all synthetic, and it's either made in Japan or now China. Because
right.
Curry, which was the original company in Japan, still has there, but they have a plant in China. The problem with today's fabrics is they've cut the thickness of the top coat down, and the material does not hold up nearly as well as the original stuff that we use that was developed by Curry was called Safrina, and that's still the best material. I still have a little bit left of an oddball color down in my workshop. That stuff's got to be 40 years old. What's good? I take that back, 35 years old, because it came out in 86. And that's still the best stuff that was ever built for hockey as far as making pads and gloves out of.
Sure, just because of the better sort of richness of it.
Well, it was a thicker top coat. The back was dyed the color. So I mean, they really did everything well. Now, of course, everything's either going to be on a black or white base coat, and you're not getting the base coat is not nearly as thick as it is. The urethane is not as thick. I mean, they've cheapened it, for lack of a better word.
So it's more for the cost than it is, say, the weight or any ability to cut it or sew it.
Durability went out to tubes years ago.
Right. So you mentioned Ed Belfour and that you're going to work on making a glove that's going to sort of mimic the one you made him, way back when. Can I ask you about Ed Belfour and what it was like to work with him? I mean, I've met Ed a few times, and he showed up with a
character.
I love the guy. He showed up one time where I was working previously before I was at Just Hockey, and he had a glove that he had completely taken apart. Now I wasn't the guy specifically repairing it. We had our guy who made the gloves and stuff like that, who was really going to be working on it. And I had to kind of help him out a little bit. But I just remember saying to him, like, Ed, the next time you bring us a glove, let us take it apart. But he was like really into every little bit of it and all those things. He seemed like he at least to him anyway, he really wanted to be a major part of the design.
Without question. Eddie, I'll call Eddie eccentric, for lack of a better word, because he's so into the first pair of pads I built Ed Belfour when I was back in Ann Arbor, before I ever went to Canada. I got a call from the equipment manager at North Dakota, and he said, we got a young kid coming in, a freshman, a goalie. Can we get pads for him? I said, yeah, what's his name? He said, Ed Belfour. So they got me measurements, and I built a pair of pads for Eddie, and they had green sides on it because, of course, North Dakota's colors are green and black. And Eddie wore him. That was the first exposure. I never had met him then.
Okay.
Then, Eddie called me when I was in Canada, and he was in the minors at that time. It was not with the Blackhawks. It was going up to the big club for a training camp, and they had like 10 or 12 goalies. Darren Pang was there, and a couple other goalies. Eddie said, chances of me making it aren't, the show team isn't that great, because he said, I don't play well in training camp. I said, well, Eddie, I said, the best, you'll do your best and you go from there. Well, things happened that he was able to make it to the club.
Mm-hmm.
So we built a pair of pads for him at Miller. Actually, I built a couple pair of pads for him at Miller, and we built him a catching glove. Now, the funny thing about Eddie, at that time, catching gloves, to give you some specs here, catching gloves were 48-inch circumference.
That's right. Yeah.
All the way around the glove, including the cuff. Eddie, we built him a CGC 100, which was the pro glove, 48. Eddie wanted a CGC 110, which was an intermediate glove. And that glove was 45, which of course is the legal
There you go. Yeah,
belt
today's standard.
And I remember Eddie saying, I said, I don't know how these guys could stick handle with this big glove. And of course, Eddie was a wonderful stick handler because he had been a forward before he became a goalie.
Mm.
And I'm trying to think who was the great stick handling goalie at the Flyers.
Ron Hextall.
Yeah, Hextall was another
Mhm.
great stick handler.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Those guys, those two
In more
guys,
ways than one, not just shooting the puck either.
yeah, he was Mr. Hatchet Man, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, so we built him a couple pair of pads, and then when I left Miller, they built the last pair, and he hated them. He wouldn't wear them. So I know I built at least, I and my people built at least 2 pair for him. And I think the 3rd pair we did. Anyway, make a long story short, I'm back there. I'm back in Ann Arbor. I've just got to dip under a new name. I'm making Glenn Miller stuff instead of Miller, just like Keaton did, because the Miller name was left up in Canada as part of the deal when I left, and that's fine. And Stu Gould and Sam Dodero were the 2 guys that ran Great Saves, and they did all the repair for the Blackhawks. And at that time, and I think it was 92 or 93, Eddie was the starter and Dominic Hasek was the backup.
Mm-hmm.
So Stu called me, said, Hasek wants a pair of pads, Great Saves pads. I said, okay. So I built a pair of pads with the specs that Stu gave me for Hasek. Great Save, we put Great Save logos on because I was building in Ann Arbor. And we sent them to him. Well, Eddie was there, and Stu knew Eddie pretty well and was talking with him. And he said, those are nice looking pads. Who builds those for you? And he said, Glenn Miller. Eddie goes, huh? Who? He said, Glenn Miller. And Eddie said, measure me now for a pair of pads. So he did, and I ended up building 2 pair or 3. I never can remember if it's 2 or 3. The last pair were the red ones.
Okay.
The red Great Saves, of which I had. Eddie left me a pad later on when I was building them for Cooper, which that's another story. I'll get into that.
Sure.
And I had the poster to go with it. Somebody sent me a poster, so I had a poster of the pad and that. And I ended up somebody locally was a Belfour fan. He wanted it, so I only had the 1 pad, and I sold him the 1 pad and the poster. I didn't want it. What do I need it for? Anyway, so I built 3 pair of pads for Great Saves, and then I moved to North Carolina. So I'm building Great Saves pads, and then Eddie gets an offer from Cooper. They want him to wear their gear, and they were going to pay him a 6-figure salary, and I think he got a percentage of the sales too.
Wow.
And he said, there's one catch. He said, this guy, meaning me, builds the goal pad. You send him whatever he needs and builds it. So Eddie and me flew up June or July that summer. We flew up to Cooper's facility in Mississauga.
Yeah.
They had originally been down in downtown and I actually went to the original facility in 82 or 83 when it was downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
And they moved to a different plant in Mississauga. Eddie said, before we go any farther, he said, this guy, meaning Glenn, is going to build the pad or I'm not signing the deal. So that kind of put the kibosh to it right then and there. And they said, okay, what does he need? And I said, I'm going to need this, knees, stuff, patches, all that kind of stuff. They sent it to me, and they want him to introduce the Reactor 5 series or the Reactor series. He's going to wear the Reactor 5. And the pad has got slanted shins for graphics. Oh, it's a friggin' nightmare. So they send me the parts that I need. I build the pad, send it to Eddie. Eddie liked it. And the thing I had to know about Belfour, he'd get the pad and he'd check it out and he'd say, everything's perfect. Don't touch nothing. 3 weeks later, you're getting a laundry list of what he wants changed.
Yeah.
I think he stayed up at night, literally looked to see, well, if I change this, the biggest problem I had with Eddie was convincing him if you change part A, it's going to affect B, C, D, and E.
Yeah, the unintended consequences of customizing your gear.
And I finally got him. It's about the third or fourth pair to understand that. But I ended up over 2 years building him 7 pair of pads. Then I moved to North Carolina in October of '95.
Okay.
I got ahead of myself. And Eddie called when I was in North Carolina. I had just arrived down there. And he said, called me and said, can you build me a pair of pads? I said, Eddie, I don't have a shop or anything organized. I said, I can't do anything with it. So he got Cooper, the people at Cooper, to build the pad. He wore them twice, called me, said, they're terrible. I hate them.
Oh.
I said, what are you going to do? He said, well, I'm going to wear what I've got. And Eddie was one of those rare goalies. Now, most goaltenders today, they'll have a game pair and a practice pair of pads. Eddie was that unusual goalie. Once he got a pad broke in, that's all he wore. He didn't wear anything other than that in both practice and games. Well, the downside of that is you beat the hell out of the pad.
Yeah.
You don't beat it up in games, you beat it up in practice.
Right.
So because of that, he would go through pads more often at that time than the other guys. Now, today's goalies, I'm told the goaltenders in the NHL will go through 3 to 4 sets of gear a year.
Yeah, well, that just depends on the guy because there's all these other things they do.
You take Allen. When Allen was at St. Louis, we built him 12 pair of pads and 25 catching gloves one year.
Did he wear any of the catchers?
What they were doing, he'd use it for a while, then they'd take it out and the team would sell it, make money on it. You know, they'd raffle it off or whatever they're doing, and then they get him a new pair. And what I'm sure most of your audience has to know is the pros don't pay for anything.
No, of course they don't.
Nothing.
All by the team.
The team pays for everything.
Yes.
So whether he got 1 pair of pads or 15, it didn't matter. He ain't paying for it. He just tells them what they want and we go from there.
Yeah.
So I get a call in the summer of '96 from Mike Vaughn. He said, Eddie is decided to go with an offer that we made to him for us to build pads for him. I said, that's great. He said, what can you tell me, Glenn, about Eddie? I said, you got a half hour?
Yeah. Are you sitting down?
I went through it. I said, he's going to tell you this is great. And I said, 3 weeks later, he's going to say this and this and this and this and this is wrong. Well, Mike told me that they built 9 pair of pads for Eddie. The first time, 9 pair of pads.
Like right out of the gate.
Well, they built the first pair. He didn't like it. Built the second. They went through 9 pairs.
Right.
Mike's told Eddie, we're not building another pair. You're going to take this or nothing. So Eddie took the 9th pair. But that was what they had you're dealing with. And Eddie was never bad or nasty. He just wanted things his way.
Yeah, he was kind of matter of fact about it.
Yeah, he said, can we do this? And if we do this, can we? And he was with that in all his gear that he wore. He brought me an arm pad. I was in Chicago one time to go see the guys. He brought me an arm pad. Now, this was the arm pads that he had used since he was in junior. This thing had been rebuilt, I don't know how many times. And he had the Miller glove with it too. And I looked at the Miller glove. He said, can you rebuild that? I said, Eddie, there's nothing to rebuild. I said, the best thing you can do is give it to the dog for a chew toy or bury it out back and bury it deep so that the gophers can get out. Because this thing was beyond trash. That's all I could tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, it looked like the dog had chewed on it for a week. And the arm pads were just as bad. I mean, there was literally the only thing holding it together, I think, was tape.
Yeah. Just, it gets to a certain point, I guess. It's like, well, yeah, can we just Can we just
Yeah,
shine this one up a
yeah,
little bit?
yeah, you know, put a stitch here and everything. I'm told that Martin Brodeur wore his arm pads for like 15 years, you know?
Yeah, there's a bit of a legend
Certain
there.
goalies, they got old gear, they don't want to break in new gear. They're just happy
Yeah.
with it.
Well, even that Marty was that type of goalie too, was sort of very much about his movements and things. So
Yeah.
that almost for that, I wouldn't be surprised either.
So, you know, goaltenders, they're a strange brew. We both know that.
Oh, absolutely.
But and I was lucky enough in the pros that I dealt with, including Trachak, that I most of them were class guys. I'll just say the worst one was Richard Brodeur, and I'll leave it at that because that would be a half.
Okay. All right.
Richard Brodeur in Vancouver was a nightmare.
All righty.
Absolute nightmare.
We'll leave it at that.
And we'll leave it at that. But I
So-
had the class, if I may, the two classiest goaltenders I ever dealt with was Rogie
Yeah.
and Trachak.
Okay.
And they are in a class by themselves. Just, you cannot meet nicer people.
Yeah. I met Vlad a few times when he was doing his goalie school, and I would bring out equipment and I would show the kids, and I would have them, you know, to look at the gear, they could get their hands on it. And you know, Vladdy was always great. Like, he'd have those kids would beat me back to the store looking to buy the things I just showed them. He was always really great to work with. I always liked sort of looking in at the rink as he was teaching stuff. He had some pretty unorthodox things, but I mean, you know, it was always fun to be around.
Yeah, I'll tell you the story about Trachak because that. I'm in the second year at Northwest Miller up in Vancouver, and I get a call from my partner Gary. He says Trachak's going to have a goalie school at north of Vancouver, for 2 weeks. He said, could you build him a pair of pads? And I said, Gary, I can build it anybody, really. I said, yeah. He said, if I set up a meeting, you want to go out and see him? I said, yeah. So I talked to two guys that were my assistants, Al and Kirby. And I asked him, I said, we have a chance to go meet Trachak on Wednesday. It was a Wednesday. And it was going to be in the afternoon. And I said, if we go, here's the deal. We got to come back and stay late and work on gear because we're behind. And they said, sure. So I believe Kirby drove out there, and the three of us. So I go out there. Al's got the measurement for him. Kirby's got the tape, and I'm introduced to Trachak by I'll call it his bodyguard. First, now Trachak speaks very little English.
Mhm.
And he's big bone Russian, for lack of a better word. Wonderful guy. And I'm explaining to his translator, his bodyguard and translator, that this is the measurement I want to take. So he's in shorts. And I looked, and I had heard he'd had surgery done on each knee so he could do a particular movement. Sure enough, there's a scar on each knee. And I took the measurements, and I always use three measurements critical: was ankle bone, the kneecap, middle of the kneecap, on the inside of the leg. From the outside of the leg, I measured from the middle of the knee. And if you put your hand on the outside of your knee and you lift your leg and flex it, you'll feel there's a hinge bone there. It's part of the femur. And I measured from there to the waist, or belt loop. And that was more of a reference measurement. Then the third measurement that I would take was middle of the kneecap to the middle of the thigh rise, or where he wanted the pad to come.
Yeah.
And I was the only guy to my knowledge to this day that I wanted to know the skate size and model of skate that the goalie was wearing, because that dictated the length of the scoop. And the scoop is from the break of the ankle to the bottom of the pad. You got somebody who wears a size 8 skate, he's going to need a longer scoop than somebody who's wearing a size 12 skate. And nobody, to my knowledge in hockey, nobody ever did that. And everything I built for goalies was custom.
Mm-hmm.
We built stock stuff in Canada, but I never built any stock stuff per se. Actually, I did for Great Saves in Ann Arbor. Everything I built for goalies was custom to their specs.
Right.
And I think in all the years, I only had one pad that was off. And that's because the guy gave me the wrong measurements. You know.
Well, there you go. I'd say that was his fault then. So,
Right.
so when you do the thigh, you go from the kneecap to like the hip,
Well, yeah, you go,
and then you
go
work
outside of the knee,
backwards to
outside
the
of the
thigh
knee,
rise.
away from the reference. Then you measure, you take your two fingers and put the big finger on the bottom of the kneecap and actually in the thumb on the top of the kneecap where it starts and stops, and you go into the middle. Because for a pad to fit in no days of old, for a pad to fit correctly, when it's broke in, the middle of your knee cap should be in the middle of that middle knee roll.
Right. Right.
And when the guys would get pads and they said, well, the pad's an inch high. I said, yeah, it's an inch high for a reason. The old pads, when they were stuffed with deer hair and that kind of thing, they would shrink.
Let that sucker settle down a little first.
Settle, correct. It was settled. So that's the way that we did. Anyway, with Trachak, going back to the Trachak story, so I took the 3 measurements and doing like stat and stuff. And as we're leaving, I said, we will get these to you before training camp is over. Excuse me, before it's goalie school for 2 weeks is over, not training camp, goalie school. So I stayed up and built them. I had the girls sew up the face, and then I'm the one that took the pad to completion. And then the other guy, my people were building the gloves, and we built them in red and white, which was of course, Soviet colors, just for the hell of it. And here's the kicker. Now, he had probably the best goalie in the world. Would you say at one point, the best goalie in the world?
I mean, arguably, for sure. Yeah.
He never got a custom pair of pads till I built one for him. Everything that he wore was Coopers that they throwed at him, stock sizes.
Yeah. That sounds very Soviet era.
Yeah. But when I'm leaving, I'm asking the translator, I said, I want you to tell Vladislav, thank you so very much for the opportunity. And I asked the translator, I said, what is your real function? He said, well, I work for the KGB and I'm here with him for protection and a translator.
Right. Make sure he doesn't run off.
The biggest problem that you run into in today's hockey is everything's butterfly style. But it puts a tremendous stress on the knees and the hips.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can wear it some ways that make it even worse if you're not careful.
Have you seen Patrick Waugh walk today?
I don't believe so, but I'm guessing it's not good.
You're cringing just watching him walk.
So he would have played at a, most of his career in the pro fly pad, if we call like velocity onward, those, what I guess we started calling them pro fly pads.
Yeah, pro fly.
So he played most of his career leading up to that.
Correct.
So yeah, he probably is the one guy who played the most butterfly with the least butterfly equipment. So I'm not surprised if his hips and his knees are a little torn up.
I'm not a Patrick Waugh fan. I'll tell you a story about Eddie. Eddie and Patrick Waugh get along like gasoline and water.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Eddie about something with Patrick Waugh, and he said, "No, it's Roy." And I said, "Eddie, it's Waugh." He said, "No, it's Roy." He said, "For me, it's Roy." They did not like each other at all.
Yeah, I think I had heard that before. So there's a few different ones that go back and forth.
Yeah, there was no love lost between those two. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Waugh had the distinction why he's a better goalie because he played on better teams.
Yeah, he definitely was.
I think if you'd have put Eddie on those teams, he probably would have had a record comparable to Waugh.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I think I hold his playoff record, especially the 2 cups with Montreal. I think I hold his records there pretty high because those really weren't teams that were supposed to win.
No,
he was so dominant.
He won the cup that without question.
Oh yeah. And obviously Colorado were stacked teams. I mean, and he still had to win those games. And Eddie got his with Dallas and Eddie
always wanted to play for the Wings. And if you remember, there was a time where Eddie was a free agent. And I think Curtis Joseph and Eddie were they were up there.
Yeah.
And the Wings took Curtis Joseph.
That was when Curtis left Toronto.
Yeah, which was, Curtis was on his way down. There's no other way to say it. He never did well with the Wings. And of course, when that happened, I remember a friend of mine telling me, well, he said, we're gonna get Belfour in Toronto, and which he happened.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem is, I believe the last time the Maple Leafs in the recent past have done anything, wasn't that when Ken Dryden was GM?
Yeah. So 2001 with Joseph on the team, they went to the conference final. They lost to Colorado. That was, I believe, when Carolina. And that was, I think, when Carolina, I think, believe they got swept, or they lost. I'm certain it's to Detroit.
They got smoked.
Yeah. And that was Joseph on that team. That was all those Pat Quinn teams.
Sure.
That did so well. And with Eddie, I know that was sort of like leading into around that lockout era and he played well. He did. And I really started admiring his game more when I got to watch him more. And I know there were things about Eddie, like by the time Eddie got to Toronto, he played such a drastically different style than what he had started out as.
Sure.
He sort of
halfway through,
he sort of played in a rocking chair. Like he
Yeah.
didn't waste an extra foot of space, and he was only where he needed to be. And I remember watching him, and he used to kind of do this thing when he was with Chicago, and then when he was with San Jose, and he'd have the arms way out, and he'd have sort of his legs would be sort of way out, and he'd almost dare you like on a breakaway, and it would just be like, snap right into the legs would come straight down, and it was so wild, but then, like I said, like later on, he became such a more calm, sort of just relaxed. And I think the guys who played in front of him had an easier time because of that too.
Yeah, because you never were going to beat Eddie on a breakaway. I don't think I ever saw him get beat on a breakaway.
Yeah, he was good that way. Yeah.
The second shot, yeah. The first shot, no, you're not going to beat him.
If he's in the corner, if he's in the corner for the rebound, you might get it.
When Eddie was in Chicago, that's when Trachak became the goaltending coach.
Yeah.
And then Eddie finished that one half season because you had the owners. What the heck was the owners of the Blackhawks? He was the old man was tighter and tight when it came to money.
Oh, Wirtz, Bill Wirtz, dollar bill.
Yeah. And the Blackhawks' success came after he died and the son took over.
That's right.
And they spent money on the new facility, the whole 9 yards. And they had 3 cups in 5 years, something like that.
That's right. Yeah.
But when
they undid the belt a little.
Right. But this is why Eddie left. I mean, the Blackhawks traded him because they knew his contract he wasn't going to resign, or he wanted a lot more money, and he deserved it. So they peddled him off to the Sharks for a little less than half the season. Well, when Eddie was out there, he couldn't call Trachak for instructions because Trachak was under contract for the Blackhawks.
Right.
And so he did. But what Eddie would do is he would, 2 weeks before training camp, I think Trachak was out in California someplace, and Eddie would fly up there and spend 2 weeks with him, working out and everything, and just checking stuff, much like a swing coach in golf, on Eddie before he went to training camp. And Trachak was no longer an instructor for the Blackhawks, so that's why Eddie was able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But great respect between Trachak and Belfour. Always.
Well, he changed his number to 20 out of sort of honoring that relationship,
sure.
And certainly had that.
He just, great goaltenders. Great goaltenders.
Oh yeah.
And I've had the luxury of having met a lot of great guys that are goaltenders. Now today's goaltenders, a lot of them, there's still some great guys out there, but there's a few guys that you just don't want to deal with, because no matter what you do, you never can please them.
Right.
I had with King Richard out there in Vancouver. No matter what I did, I couldn't please him. I finally said, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't go see him anymore. My partners were not happy. I said, you send Al and you go see him. I said, I'm not doing anything for him anymore. I'm done. And of course, my one partner would say, well, that's not very. I said, look, if I thought I could make him happy and stuff, I'd go. I said, I'm done. And in fact, he's the only goaltender. He called me after I left Vancouver in February of '90. I'm back in Ann Arbor in Michigan. I'm working on stuff, and I get a call. And it was a summer 90 or 91. I'm not sure. I can't remember. And I answered the phone, and Glenn Miller speaking. How can I help you? And Glenn, this is Richard Brodeur. Do you remember me? I said, yes, Richard, I do. He said, would you be willing to build a pair of pads for me here in Hartford? Because you got traded to Hartford.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
"Oh," and hung up the phone. True story. Only guy I've ever hung up on goaltending equipment ever in 40 some years.
Well, at least you gave him the answer first, So,
Mhm.
you can't completely fault you for that one, I guess.
No, and it's a situation that, I've learned there's certain goaltenders or certain people, even customers. My wife said it best. She said, you can't please them, cut your loss early.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
She said, all it's going to be is headaches. And she's right.
Well, that's just it. I mean, you can only do so much.
You only do so much.
So
Go ahead.
I was going to say with all the new gear, obviously everything being, so vastly different and everything since you started to, and then when you're working with Vaughn and you're obviously much more modern and things like that. What is it about today's gear maybe that you really like, or what are some of the things that you really sort of you see and you go, oh, that's smart, that's clever?
I like the fact that the equipment is light. I don't
Sure.
like the fact that there's no durability to it, because that means that you're gonna constantly have to be breaking in gear. Now, granted, breaking in the new gear ain't like breaking in the old gear.
That's true.
The problem that with today's gear, I'll give you for instance, Vaughn has three pro lines of gear every year.
Yeah.
And each line, when they come out with a line, be it V8, V9, whatever you want to call it, that particular line is made to last 2 years.
Yeah.
So it'll be this season and next season, and then they will replace it. Mike does something I think I wouldn't do. He comes out with 3 pro lines, which you don't need. You only need 2.
Sure.
But what he has to do is they have to build a complete line. A line being not just pads, but pads, gloves, armors, up pants, the whole 9 yards.
Mm-hmm.
You have to redesign that. And that everybody, what people have to understand, to design stuff, they start designing new gear in January.
Yeah. Yeah. That was something I had a conversation. That was something I had a conversation with one of the guys from Bauer. It's basically 6 months into your run of this new line you've got. Basically, I say, like, you're killing your babies and you're already starting to work on the next line.
And it's gotten to the point, in Mike's case, I would only do 2 lines. I'd do one this year and one next year. So you're replacing a line every other year.
Mm-hmm.
But so much, there's not so much you almost got to the point you can't reinvent the wheel. Most of the that you're seeing today are graphics.
Yeah, new graphics.
You're
putting a different strap on something.
Do you know why they quit putting the laces and the straps through the front?
Why is that?
It hurts where your graphics go. So they want a blank canvas.
Oh, like a center stitch.
That's why you don't, a lot of pads today, you don't see the lacing come through the face.
They have the hidden center stitch.
Yeah, they lace it into the tabs on the back of the face.
Yeah, it interferes with the look.
The biggest problem is the equipment is almost becoming throwaway today. There's no, you make it lightweight and stiff for today's goalie as much as possible, but durability went out the window. Mm-hmm. Somebody says, well, we get new people. The problem is they're not $500 pads anymore.
That's
You're talking $2,000 plus.
Yeah.
So, for the average person to drop $2,000 every other year for a pair of pads, unless the guy's got money, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, that's a harder way to go at it. And I do see some of those guys, and no matter what, every 2 years they're in to get something. But
I see it in golf. I used to see it in golf. He had to have that new driver every year.
Yeah.
$500.
And it's still going in the water.
Yeah. Yeah. You still hook it in the water, All right. We still ain't breaking 100. You know how it goes. The problem, like arm pads are a perfect example. I've always had a running argument with Mike Vaughn. It's kind of a friendly argument for the last 25. My philosophy on arm pads, and I will say this only because it's my philosophy. Arm pads, the arms should be laced onto the chest pad. And you're going to say why? Couple of reasons. Your flexibility is cut down when the arms are sewn on to the chest pad. Mm-hmm. You're not nearly as flexible because the two hinge points on your arms are basically locked down somewhat. I came up with the arm pad that I designed on the way back on a plane on the way back from Canada in '88. Was if you lace the arms on, you could build the arms in 5 lengths.
Yeah.
You could build the chest pad in 5 sizes. You walk into a store. You want to get chest and arm. Okay. You go find an arm that fits you. You try on the medium, you try on the large, whatever. Put the arm, and I always tell guys, take gloves in with you. If you're going to get an arm and chest, make sure you got your gloves with you. Because the biggest problem with arm pads today is they're built to stock sizes and there's no adjustment. Yes, some of them have come up with the Velcro adjustment. Trust me, it ain't nearly as good as if it's laced on. Having been at Vaughn's, I've seen that. That's why I know. But you would pick the arm that you wanted. You would pick the size of the chest pad you wanted, and whether you wear it in or out will determine how long you want it. The guys that wear them inside their pants want shorter chest pads than the guys that wear them out.
That's me. I'm a tucker.
Okay. And if you lace it on, so you get the arm that you want and you get the chest pad that you want, you lace it on 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you walk out the store with a unit that's basically custom fit to you. 80% plus of the arm and chest pads today sold retail do not fit the goaltender properly. And you think about it, other than your cup and your mask and your skates, let's say cup, backs, and skates, what is a piece of equipment that's got to fit you properly?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You want that arm and body on it.
Correct. And if the arms are too long, it pushes your gloves off. If the arms are too short, you're going to get reamed, normally above where the cuff and the arm pad meet.
Yeah.
And it's because of that. And I tried to convince Mike, no, he said, our dealers want whole units and everything else. Fine. But you think about it. If you were a store and all you had to order was arms and chest pads and have parts, you'd be laughing. Your sales would be easier.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of benefit I could see from that, and then there's some things about that might get a little bit tricky.
If you're in the retail level, yes.
Now, for me, I think I would be fine with it. Now, on days I'm not at work, and if I don't always have a good guy in who's doing goal, I'd hate to think that someone's walking out there with the left arm sewn onto the right shoulder and a right arm sewn onto the.
Yeah, the difference with me was the arms were not unisex. You had a difference between the arm on the catching glove side and the arm on the blocking glove side.
Yes.
And what I had 2 rows of eyelets on the one unit that I made, 2 rows of eyelets, and we made it in Canada. And there were 2 rows of eyelets on the flap underneath the cap on the chest pad and 2 on the arm. You could raise and lower the arm up to 1 inch.
Mm-hmm. Just to give you that little bit of a leeway.
Correct.
Kid suddenly grows.
Plus,
yeah,
you could tape because if you well know, the arm on a blocking glove has to turn inward.
Mm-hmm.
The arm on a catching glove has to turn outward. By how you lace that, you could determine the pitch you put on those arms.
Okay. How'd you
and the name of the game on arm pads, just so you know, is adjustment.
Oh, absolutely.
And today's units do not put enough adjustment on these things. I can't tell you how many guys have said, God, I love my arm pads, but the arms are too long, or the arms are too short, or the chest pad's too short. Whereas and this has always been my philosophy.
Yeah, I like something I definitely like something that's either laced in, or if it's got a strap to it or something, and that, it just makes it that much more versatile. I know whenever I'm fitting an arm and chest, the first thing I do, we put it on. The first thing I do almost always is I do it up for them around the back. And then I go to the back. Usually I grab the back of the elbow, and then I'll just start pulling up, making sure the elbow's in the right spot. And then I'm going to loosen everything off by about an inch or so of strap, because I find so many guys, and especially guys I see online, and it's like, oh, I wore this chest protector once and I can't get used to it. And it's like, oh, that didn't come from me.
It's because they had it too tight. They didn't loosen everything up before.
Yeah, sometimes I think a lot of the time it's not knowing your size, or it's not knowing just not knowing how to adjust them properly. And it's hard to fault the customer, especially if they're ordering it online. But
Sure.
I know you said 80% of people out there got arm and bodies that are the wrong size. I think I'm the guy selling the other 20%. That must be what it is.
But I mean, and the arm and chest pad have gotten to be so big and bulky because
Some of them, yeah, definitely.
to make it light, to cut the weight down. And the tremendous push in hockey is trying to cut the weight down as much as possible. Rogie, when I was building that stuff for Rogie, he asked me, he said, have they ever considered building pads with air in them, like an airbag type thing, I mean, I said, you mean like a floating raft? Like you in a pool. And he said, yeah. I said, the only problem if Rogie would be if that thing spring a leak during the game and they take a shot. I said, you're going to be sitting in the crease. And I said, your leg's going to be sitting over in the corner.
Yeah.
He said, he thought about it. He said, yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. Well, Brian's had the air pack, but I don't think that's exactly what was in there.
No. Did you ever see the ones when Heaton put the Brock technology?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. The exhale and those that beaded foam.
And if they get a rip in it,
oh yeah, it's just
all over the ice.
Be raining foam. Interesting idea. I mean, Brian was a bit of a mad scientist, and wasn't afraid to try stuff.
No, you try stuff. What Brock is instead of using styrene plastic, they use polyethylene plastic for the beads. And then they would compress it. I saw some of the stuff put into a sheet form, and it was wonderful. I mean, tremendous blow absorbent. It comes from self-defense, I think. Self-defense is where Brock technology was originally introduced.
Well, they made some good arm and body, some really nice, light, sort of free, airy feeling, arm and bodies with TPS at that time too, that had the Brock sort of sheet.
Correct.
But I almost said it was almost kind of like chainmail, except obviously not as heavy, but it sort of had that where it could just sit on the body pretty nice. Yeah. So that was pretty good.
And it's the problem, that's the problem with the arm pads today is so many guys, especially the older guys, they don't like them because they're so big and bulky. They're lightweight, but that's how to get them protective, they have to be big and bulky. Yeah. And I've got some ideas I'm playing around with in my mind on an arm and chest, just between you and me.
All right. I'm not going to pry. I often wonder if the arm and chest is sort of the next thing that they try to shrink down, and sort of, they try to more sort of form it to the body, but it's so difficult when you need something to bend, you have to protect the sides because you have to build a bend into it. So
sure.
It'll be interesting to see what I remember those old Cooper ads where they had the goalie and he was sort of just wrapped in, and then this would have been early 90s, I think. I don't know, it was all gray. I forget what that line was called.
Mike Vaughn called that bib the Mechelon man because that's what it looked like.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I understand the theory behind it, but I can tell you, application works.
Yeah, concept to practical application was, and there was probably some gaps. I was even going to say, I mean, obviously you touched a little bit about it, that you're doing some sort of tributes type sets for some guys, and I've seen some sort of more old school stuff coming out that I've seen pictures of. And so besides, with things like that, what are you up to with gear these days?
Well, I had somebody, you love this. I had somebody from the other side of Ottawa. So he's up in your neck of the woods, Canada. He contacted me, was it last fall? He can't manage to acquire GM10, which is an old blocker from like 63, 64.
Yeah.
Mint condition, needed very little work. He had a catching glove. Now the catching glove, the way it used to work before they came up with the goalie gloves. So we'll go back to the early 60s. If you're a goaltender, say here in Michigan or anywhere, I mean, he had Olympic Sports, which was based at I believe based in the Olympic ice arena where the Wings played. And they had baseball gloves in there for it. Normally first baseman's glove. You'd go in there and pick a first baseman's glove that you want. And then they said, Lefty Wilson will build a cuff, and Lefty Wilson will sew the cuff on that was your glove. Well, the glove that I got from this gentleman, which I'm going to leave him nameless at the moment, only for obvious reasons. This is a Japanese baseball glove. I just finished completely relacing the lacing because, excuse me, all the lacing was dry rotted.
Right.
And I have to condition the glove. I rebuilt the cuff. I took all the stitching out of the cuff because I always wanted to see what an Olympic cuff looked like. This is before I even started repairing stuff.
Right.
And I rebuilt the cuff. It had vinyl on the lining. I took the vinyl, was all ripped, took that out, replaced it with canvas, which is what they used to use, and rebuilt it. To show you how old it is, there's some plastic protection. We call them stays. They're channels, and there's a piece, in today's world, they'd be plastic. They used bamboo that was cut in half.
Yeah.
That was the protection. So I have to, the cuff is done. I have to recondition the leather on that and put that in there. And then I will sew it up. And that's part of the thing. Here, I told him he ain't going to get this till fall.
Right.
It just is what it is. And then he had two other pieces of equipment. He had a Kineski arm and chest, of which I've only seen two of them before, that I got to be reconditioned. But the rare piece that I've never seen one, he has a Kineski chest pad. I've never seen one. So, I've started reconditioning the leather on that. I've got to replace the straps on it and stuff like that. But I mean, these are rare pieces, rare pieces.
Wow.
So, I mean, I like working. I like challenges. I like old stuff. I don't like working on.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. The one glove I don't like working on is Brian's. There's just so much stuff in there. And
Even
I remember,
like going back to the old ones, you mean?
well, yeah. But let's take what if it was a Heat, it was a 3000, what Brian make, a 450, 451 or 452 or a Thief or something like that.
Yep.
And I remember looking at it, and I asked Mike Vaughn one time, I said, what is it with Brian's? He said, here's the thing. And this is long before Mike Vaughn bought the company. He said, we would do the thing in 3 parts. Brian would do it in 10. I said, why? He said, I can't tell you. I've always said, keep it simple, stupid, right? So much of hockey today is graphics. It's the look. Johnny needs a new glove this year over last year, so we got to come up with something that's we tweak the graphics, we do this, but we don't do a lot really to change the integrity of the glove. We just make it look different, and that's why it goes. And you're getting to the point in goalie equipment. How do you reinvent the wheel?
Yeah. So much of it now is, well, even just because everything is measured, everything has to be a certain length and can only be a certain thickness. Your knee stacks can only be a certain size. And,
correct.
So it's very difficult to almost describe to somebody, when someone says, what's the difference between this pad and this pad? And it's like, they kind of have a lot of the same things.
Right. The other thing, if you're in the NHL, they restrict how many logos you can put on and what size the logos are.
That's right. Yeah, there's that too. Yeah.
You're paying $150,000 a year for licensing, and they're going to tell you what you can and cannot do as far as your name on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know.
I remember Grant Fear wanted to have Pepsi logos on the front of his pads, and the NHL said no.
Have you ever seen that pad, a picture or anything? I don't
No.
know anyone who has. And I really hope that pad did exist. And one day, if I could ever come across one piece of equipment, that's probably what it would be. I want the Pepsi pads.
That's probably the holy grail because it was so oddball.
Yeah.
I remember DNR came out with what was the laser was a laser 5.
Mm-hmm.
The theory was great. It was going to be basically a pad that you could change things and build this and stuff on it. And he wore him in the All-Star game. Remember? I don't know if you remember that. He couldn't even move.
Yeah, it was like it was a pretty flat pad, and Yep. There was that era had some of those like Winlight and stuff, like some of those like real interesting Aeroflex things that were coming out. It was some Cowboys doing some stuff there, Wow. Listen, you've been more than generous with your time, Glenn. I can't thank you enough. This was certainly something I was really looking forward to. I'm glad we were able to touch base. Yeah, I'm glad we were able to get it going again today.
Get the Zoom somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
exactly. Listen, if you're ever in Toronto, if you ever come up for anything, I owe you dinner. You
Well,
give me a shout, let me know.
hoping Mass Fest will be there this summer in June.
Okay, you know what? I will hope to probably see you there then. Well, Glenn, thanks again for doing this with me today. It's been a ton of fun, and I think everyone out there is really going to enjoy it. And yeah, hopefully, if you make it up, like I said, I owe you a dinner probably. So
Hope you're there. I hope
great.
you're there. Good to see.
Thanks,
Super.
Glenn.
Have a great day. Thank
Oh,
you.
you too.
Talk to you soon.